Well, hello and welcome to More to the Story of Molly White. I'm so glad you joined me again this week for another great episode. And this week we're going to be talking about a very important topic that we've had this guest on before, and it's called the third option. But before we introduce the guest, I want to bring in my awesome, wonderful co-host, Mary Browning.
Thank you, Molly. So good to be part of the show today, and I'm excited about hearing a part two for our guest today.
Yes, and this is a topic that we've discussed a little bit before, and we've had other guests on sharing their adoption stories, and our returning guest, is going to be talking a little bit about that. But the importance of educating people about adoption, right? And
Yes,
especially the younger generation,
yes,
um, because adoption has always had some kind of a negative connotation to it. But I think it's because people don't quite understand all the options there are to adoption, correct?
that's true. That is very true. So, Terri Marcroft, our guest today, is very knowledgeable in this area and can give our listeners more information in this area. So,
Yes, and let's welcome Terri to the show.
Thank you so much, Molly and Mary. I'm thrilled to be with you today.
Well, it's good to see you again, Terri. And I know you and Mary are real involved in the third option. And that's what we're going to kind of focus our discussion on today, because we really want to educate our listeners and our viewers um, about the beauty of adoption. And so,
Right.
Mary, you and Terri, and of course, Terry's been involved in this. Um, the third option. So, kind of tell us maybe a little bit of background about your personal story, and then about the third option.
Okay, sure. So my personal story in adoption started with the adoption of my daughter, which was back in 1999. My husband and I were able to adopt a newborn in Northern California, which is extremely unusual and very rare.
Mm.
Um, when my friends started facing infertility and saying, "How did you do that? And how was it possible to have such a beautiful adoption story?" I started researching it and found out that out of almost 3 million women in the country that face unplanned pregnancy, fewer than 1% of them choose adoption. And
Wow.
just that blew me away and
Hmm.
led to a whole next 15 years of spreading the word about adoption. And I wanted to shout it from the mountaintops because we were blessed with such a beautiful story. And so the other reason that that's important, I think, is because adoption has changed so much in the US. It's changed from a rather negative, trauma filled, secrecy filled uh, practice to a much kinder, gentler, honest, transparent practice. And so letting people know about that is the point of my nonprofit, which is Unplanned Good.
Yeah, because when you mentioned that, of course, the numbers are staggering. Well, you said, I think last time you were on, you said like 2.8 million unplanned pregnancies and only less than 1% in
Mhm.
an adoption. But you mentioned about the old days. And I remember, if a girl got pregnant, she was shipped off somewhere and then came back without a baby.
Uh-huh.
And so that's the negative connotation and the traumatic experience of adoption, but it is totally different now.
Mhm.
And so let's talk a little bit about those options of adoption.
Well, so back in the old days that you're referring to, Molly, when we were all in high school or college and she got shipped off, as you say, when she came back, not only did she not have a baby, she was told to never talk about that again. Just forget about it
mhm.
and move on and don't even speak of it. And that, in a major life event like that, that's extremely hard to do because you just can't forget about it.
No.
That's really asking too much. And so I'm very grateful that we've changed our practices in the United States. And now we've evolved into what's called open adoption. And that's really a continuum because there are a whole lot of different ways to practice an open adoption. But it doesn't mean that any longer the woman has to just forget about this and move on, that there is a possibility for contact. And so open adoption just lays a foundation for a future relationship. It doesn't say what that relationship is going to look like or how close it's going to be or whether it involves in-person visits, but it lays a foundation and it makes everything possible. And so then from then on, you treat it like any other relationship in your life where you decide how much you're going to see this person. You decide what kind of a relationship you want to make it into, and if you want to be close or you want to be just once a year saying hello. There are a lot of different ways to have an open adoption. And so just the fact that there are possibilities to stay in touch, that's the key thing.
Absolutely. So, how are these terms negotiated with uh, the biological birth mother and the adoptive parents?
So the ideal scenario would be that the birth mother who's talking about placing her baby for adoption, well, actually, we don't call her a birth mother till she's actually placed, but she will have an idea of whether or not she wants contact and how much contact she would like. And so she can share those ideas with the adoption agency that she's working with. And in general, anything is possible. And so that's the ideal situation. If she says, this is what I would like, let's say it's one letter a year and photos twice a year, for example. She can express those wishes and tell the adoption agency that that's what she would like. And we would call that an open adoption. And then the agency can float that idea with the adoptive parents that are looking to adopt. And so if there's an adoptive couple who doesn't want any contact, they would say that right up front. And if we're all honest about what we hope and dream that this turns into, then it can be a very pleasant and ideal situation. It gets a little tricky if people aren't sure or aren't honest about their expectations, because some adoptive parents might go through with an adoption and agree to the openness, but actually that's not what they want. So if you know what you want and you say what you want, then it's possible.
Then it
Then
works.
everything is possible with an open adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a contract that you can enter into about those arrangements, isn't there, Terri?
So adoption law varies quite a lot from state to state. And in some states, there is an open adoption post adoption contact agreement. And so if it's enforceable, that varies from state to state. Right now, I think about 27 or 28 states in this country have enforceable open adoption contact agreements. And so it's not every state, but the trend is definitely going in that direction. It's going towards court enforceable contact agreements. And the reason for that trend is because we're realizing that the openness and the transparency and the honesty is a healthy thing for everybody involved in the adoption. It's healthy for the child, of course, because they get their questions answered. And it's also healthy for the birth mother and for the adoptive parents.
Amen. Amen.
So, Terri, you said that we don't call her the birth mother until after she makes a decision or after the baby's placed. Before that, is she just called the mother?
Yeah, or the expectant mother or the mother, or yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, Terri, you were mentioning earlier about the 2.8 million unplanned pregnancies, less than 1% choose adoption. How many adoptive families or couples are there waiting for a child?
Oh, that's another mind-blowing statistic. It's estimated to be between 1 and 2 million couples in this country who are hoping to adopt, closer to 2 million than 1 million. So, but of course, it's hard to document, but that's the expert's best estimate, almost 2 million.
Wow. And so I know, Mary, you've been involved in the third option in Missouri, and I want to, to talk to the audience a little bit about that. And you and Terri talk about your collaborative efforts and what's going on statewide and nationwide as far
Well,
as trying to bring this third option more public, more visible. So let's talk about that.
Okay, so the reason that got started, like I say, there are fewer than 1% who choose adoption out of all the almost 3 million who face unplanned pregnancy. So just like that statistic really blew me away when I first heard about it, to most of the adoption professionals that I know, it's a it's a it's a confusing number because it's hard to understand why it would be so low. And so if you dig into it and you find out why it's so low, it's basically an education issue and an issue of taking care of the birth mothers. So, in my opinion, if we did those two things and we educated our society about this third option, as we're calling it, and then we took better care of the birth mothers who place their babies for adoption, I think that could change the whole scenario. And so I connected last year with a bunch of my very wise and esteemed adoption colleagues who said, yeah, we're on board with that and we want to change it too. And so this group, we call it the Third Option Coalition, and Mary Browning is one of those people. So the Third Option Coalition got together and said, so how are we going to affect that change in our society? And we decided that, first of all, everyone agreed that it was a matter of education and adoption awareness and birth mother care and support. So when our White House changed to a more pro-life White House back in November, we thought, well, there should be some kind of a link between the federal funding that could be available for women's care and birth mother care and adoption. And on the other hand, the states who are responsible for all the adoption law and for their own adoption practices and foster care and and the pregnancy centers and all of those things are kind of not the pregnancy centers, but the adoption practices are all under the control of usually the state Department of Health and Welfare, or they might call it the state Child and Family Services, whatever it's called. Each state oversees all of the adoption related programs. And so what we wanted to do was connect some federal funding with the adoption programs, which would be, again, awareness, education, and birth mother care. So that's what this Third Option Coalition is doing, is connecting those two things, the funding and the programs that we need, and and then letting other states know that the third option is a program. And there's a whole list of both awareness programs and birth mother care programs that could be benefiting and put in place for the first time in all these different states. So
Amen.
we're trying to funnel federal funding into those programs state by state.
Awesome. And Mary, how did you get involved with the third option?
Well, Molly, I got involved, as Terry mentioned, she's been spearheading this project for a while, but she was inviting people that might be interested in being involved in this. And I was sitting in on behalf of the Justice Foundation because Alan had been included but was unavailable for a meeting.
Okay.
And because I was a practicing family law attorney for almost 20 years and did a lot with adoption, this seemed to be a good fit for me. And I was excited to learn about the Third Option Coalition and the possibility of educating people about the changes in adoption. Because when I first began doing adoptions, I remember judges that were just obstinate about not wanting the parents and the adoptive parents and the birth parents to know one another. And it's very different, or can be very different today. And I've facilitated some adoptions that had this post-adoption contact agreement part. And so it's very exciting, but also for the birth mother, it's one of the most loving decisions I have ever seen anyone make, to recognize that as a mother, I'm not able to parent my child, but I can be involved in choosing who might be a good fit for my child and for me as a birth mother, if I want to maintain some kind of contact and being aware of what's happening in my child's life, even if I'm not the one raising the child. So I just think it's a win-win. It's
Yes.
such a beautiful program and concept. And I just want to tip my hat to Terri, who's just been the rudder in this, driving this idea and this concept. And then all the people that have come on board with Third Option. It's really powerful coalition, and I'm excited to be part of that.
That's amazing. And I know I've heard you talk about it, and we've had Terri on before, and we've had other guests talking about their adoption experience. So let's kind of move towards how are we going to get this information into the schools? Because we know Planned Parenthood has just saturated schools and universities with their toxic, ideology. And we need to kind of follow in those footsteps. But how are y'all making progress in doing that?
So getting the information into the schools about adoption, the perfect opportunity is when a health ed class or a sex ed class is covering related topics like contraception or STDs. They talk about that in the health class. And so the first bill that we got passed in Idaho in this area was the Senate Bill 1308 from the 2024 session. And what that says is if you're talking about contraception or STDs, you will also educate about adoption. And so it requires the public schools between kindergarten and 12th grade, anytime they're talking about those subjects, they need to talk about open adoption practices of the day, local adoption resources, and the safe haven alternative, which every state has now. And so educating young people about that means that they won't graduate high school without realizing that adoption is an option. And that's half the battle right there. Just put it on their radar and let them think about it. And then furthermore, this bill, the same bill that we passed in 2024, says that college campuses that are like state universities, if they have a medical center where the students are living there full time for a year, so they're being treated at the medical center on campus, if they're testing for STDs or they're dispensing contraception, same thing. They need to give those three pieces of information about adoption. And so at least hopefully in Idaho, because that's where our first bill passed, people won't be getting into their 20s without this information. And we think at Third Option that can change the 1%. We think that could increase that number to something greater, which would
Terri, I'm sorry to interrupt, but gosh, it was back in 2000, early 2000s. I worked on legislation called Women's Right to Know. And I also was on the committee to work on the language. And what we did is we created a booklet that had all the information about pregnancy, adoption, abortion, those things. And this booklet was mandatory to be given to women who go to an abortion clinic or whatever to talk about their options. And I was wondering, do you have something like that when it comes to adoption?
It's so funny you say that, because I'm working with one of my senators right now, and we're creating a pamphlet on birth mother rights, but putting that into because Idaho has banned abortion. So that would be the next best thing, is talking about it in the area of birth mother rights. But I would love to see your pamphlet.
Yeah, I'm sure you can go on. Yeah, I'm sure you can go online, but I'll connect you with that because I feel like this is an important tool to have a visual, to have it written in a easy to understand booklet to be given to the woman who is going into the centers, for pregnancy test or be it whether it be a clinic like a doctor's office, an abortion clinic, a clinic at a college or high school, and you make it very pretty and you just put all that information in there.
Yes.
And they've got it right there in their hands.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah. And I am working with some of the pregnancy centers too, to help them help the staff understand adoption better, because you need to really have a thorough understanding in order to have the ability to speak confidently about adoption.
Yes.
Right.
And a lot of the staff in the pregnancy centers don't have the knowledge, which means they don't have the confidence to suggest it.
Yeah, and that's where I think a booklet comes in.
Yes, you're so right. You're so right.
So, Mary, are y'all working on something? You and Terri are working on something here in Missouri? They're in Missouri?
Well, the National Association for Christian Lawmakers is meeting for their meeting that they do. They do meetings usually twice a year. Their conference is occurring in the state of Missouri next week. So Terry had been asking for some time on the agenda, and I had been suggesting that as well. And we just learned this week that we will have some time to talk about third option on the National Association for Christian Lawmakers agenda next week,
Awesome. Wonderful.
occurring in Missouri. And we are very optimistic and hopeful that Missouri will become a third option state, so
Yes.
that we will adopt the model language that Idaho has passed, and that really does address, that also includes getting education into all levels of education about this issue. As Terry said, when we're talking about birth control or STDs or options for pregnancy, that we're including adoption as part of it. And I might just mention that third option is a purposeful name because right now there's a majority of people that when they find out that they have an unplanned pregnancy, that they are thinking about, can I raise the baby or should I have an abortion? They're
Right.
not thinking about adoption. So we really want to bring legitimacy to the adoption choice and take away some of the negative stigma that has surrounded adoption as an option. Most of us know someone that has been adopted or has adopted someone, or someone that has an adoptive member in their family. It's more prevalent than we talk about, and it's got a lot of positive implications.
Yeah,
Right.
thank you, Mary. So I'm just visualizing when you were speaking about that and educating, and I'm seeing buses with adoption information on it. I'm seeing billboards. I'm seeing all this type of
Right.
advertising. Could that funding come from federal, like you were talking about earlier, Terry? Trying to get federal dollars to go towards those things, or does that have
Absolutely.
to come through legislation? I mean, how
Yeah.
does that come about?
Absolutely. If your state becomes a third option state, then you can use the money either for adoption awareness, which is where those billboards and bus
Buses and all
bus
that kind of
signs,
stuff.
yeah, would go. So there's a category for that. So we listed out several things in the awareness area and several things in birth mother care. But yes, you could have your billboards and your bus plaques as well. That
Yeah,
would definitely be
yeah.
under the heading. Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, boy, we got to get that information out there, and we need the money to do that.
Yes,
You
we do
know,
have to get the information out there. So through laws is one of the ways, like Mary's saying at the conference that's coming up, she's going to be talking to legislators. And then as a team, we met with legislators in August, which is where we first launched it at the Live Action Pro-Life Lawmakers Summit. And so there we talked with about 100 lawmakers and said, this is a state issue. And the other thing is that the pro-life lawmakers have been very focused on anti-abortion laws, which I understand that, and that why that's their focus. And what we've done, I believe, is open up their thinking to say you can achieve the same goal with pro adoption laws, like advocating for adoption. It's a whole new angle, and it leaves you at the same spot in the end. It meets the same goal in the end. So it's just a different path to get there. But if that's your goal, then consider being pro adoption. And um, at the conference that we did in August, that was where we first launched it and talked about third option for the first time, repeated the statistics of how many unplanned pregnancies there are and how few women choose adoption. So we kind of reviewed all of that and then said third option is actually something that you can do about it. So please join us in this endeavor.
absolutely. We need it in Texas, and I'm going to be working on it next legislative session. So
Oh,
yes,
Good.
yes. We actually, yeah, we
I
had
just got inspired to do
we
that.
had
So I need to see your bill and your language, and then I've got a host of people who would be
Oh,
I could
great. Great.
on
Yeah, we
to
had
talk
some
about that.
positive response from Texas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we're a very pro-life state. We're just still battling the sneakiness of the abortion industry. So,
Yes, I know.
Yep. And
so what else we got on?
we might speak to the issue of, there's some pro-life states that really don't want to to give legitimacy to abortion. And I can understand that, except that it is so prevalent in our society. And now we know somewhere close to 70% of the abortions are occurring from a chemical. And so unless people have good information, unless the women out there, and even the fathers, unless the new mothers and the new fathers that are having unplanned pregnancy, unless they are aware of what's available and what good options there are, then they don't even know, which is the whole purpose of third option. Yes.
Absolutely. So what's next, Terri? We have a few minutes left. What's next in this process? Are you going federally? Have you gone to Congress and spoke on this and kind of lit the fire? Or?
I haven't been invited to speak in Congress, but the one of the things that we're very hopeful about is the head of the Department of Health and Welfare in Idaho just changed positions, and now he's working under JFK JFK in Health and Human Services. And so he's moved over there, and he was actually very helpful when we were putting this bill together for third option. And so he knows all about it. So we'll be connecting with him and then have a couple of audiences where Mary and I are attending. I'm speaking at one of the events right after the March for Life at the end of January. So we're going to keep on talking about this and sharing about it whenever we have the opportunity. Any speaking engagement, the answer is yes, because you just can't shut me up about this.
Yes.
Because we're so excited about the ideas, and they seem to be very well received as well. When people hear about it, the typical response is, yeah, that makes sense. Why would we not do that? That makes a lot of sense.
Amen.
So,
we just need to get you in front of Congress. So we'll have to start knocking on doors for you.
We're spreading the word. Yes, definitely.
Well, good. Well, you've written a couple of books. So we want you to talk about those for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to have to go.
Oh, okay. The first one I wrote in 2022 when Roe v. Wade got overturned. And so it's called Pro-Choice, Pro-Adoption. And it's written for a pro-choice audience. And I had some very specific friends and relatives in mind when I wrote this. You know, people who believe in abortion. And I know that you can't hit them over the head with a moral or religious angle. And so I didn't do that in this book. And it's very factual. It has footnotes on almost every single page. But that's talking about why we believe in adoption and why it seems healthier than choosing abortion, and even single parenting that's extremely difficult and leads to some less than desirable consequences sometimes. So that book was written for a pro-choice audience. And then the next year I came out with pro-family, pro-adoption, which is more of a Christian's viewpoint. And that was kind of to appease some of my friends who raised their eyebrows at me and wondered why I had a pro-choice book that came out of me.
Well, we do have choices, and it's not always about abortion, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's all about your audience. And so whatever approach seems to be more effective, then we're all for that. But it's sharing, both of them are sharing the information about adoption today and what open adoption looks like, and how all the possibilities lead to a healthier, more transparent, less secretive relationship between birth parents and adoptive parents. And that's really the key to creating a child-centered upbringing. And so that's what we're spreading the word about that.
Right. And we had guests on our show before that, it has to be child focused. What's best for the child. And in our society hasn't always been that way, has it? It's best for parent or, the parents to be. So yes, what's best for the child. And the child, as I think Alan Parker told me long time ago, children have the right to know their birth parents. They have that right. And so I think this open adoption, this third option, is a beautiful thing. And I'm going to do whatever I can to help, get the word out.
Yes.
And so we're out of time. I'd love to keep going, but I want to thank you for coming back on, Terri. I look forward to working with you. I'd be happy to send you a link or something to the Women's Right to Know booklet. I think
Oh,
it'll
great.
give you some great ideas because to me, a pretty little booklet with the information in there is very effective. You know,
I love that.
they can walk out with that in their hands and have all the information in there. So, and
Sure.
if you're pregnant out there and you're considering abortion, we encourage you to contact Terri, uh, contact an adoption agency and check out the open adoption process. And it
Mhm.
may be the best fit. We know personally from our own experiences, Mary and myself, that abortion is
Yes.
not the best decision. It's not a quick fix. And if we had a do-over, adoption probably would have been that best option. And so we want to encourage you to choose life for your child and choose a family for your baby if you cannot raise your child. And so, Terri, thank you for coming on. Mary, thank you. And thank y'all all for tuning in to More to the Story with Molly White. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. God bless
Thank
you.
you both so much.
Bye. Thank you, Terri.
Hello, friend. Our broadcasting wanted to take a moment to personally thank you for being a listener of the More to the Story podcast. Whether you're a longtime subscriber or just found us, we're so glad you're here. This podcast is a community built on sharing, and that's where you come in. If an episode has ever resonated with you, please consider sharing it. Text it to a friend, post it on social media. Your recommendation is the most powerful way to help these important stories reach new ears. We are also inviting businesses and individuals to partner with us as official sponsors. Sponsoring the podcast is a wonderful way to reach a dedicated, thoughtful audience while directly supporting our mission. If you'd like to explore sponsoring the podcast, we invite you to visit our website at www.moretothestorypodcast.org. Again, that's www.moretothestorypodcast.org. Thank you for being a part of our story.